a group of 9 brothers, very strong, adults, not children. They set out to commit that heinous and horrible and grave crime against who else but their young brother. That's what the brothers of Yusuf tried to do. And there are many lessons in the story of Yusuf. It's not the focus of my lectures. But there's one in particular that I'd like to draw your attention to. They went out into the desert with the intent of nothing but to kill their brother. It wasn't to throw him out in the desert so a caravan could pick him up and take him to a land far, far away. It wasn't to scare him off. It wasn't to threaten him. It wasn't to do any of those things. They had reached a stage where the only thing that they wanted accomplished was to bring death to their own little brother. Why that happened? Well, that's a different story. But it was envy, it was jealousy that culminated and built up, that reached that stage of one wanting to bring death and destruction to his own brother. They went into the desert, and just as they were about to commit their heinous crime, a debate was suddenly started within the group, where some of them felt a certain degree of mercy and compassion towards their brother. I mean, let's face it, he was very young. According to some traditions, he was 11. According to others, he was only 9 years old. And you have a bunch of very strong, muscular, adult brothers who are out there trying to kill him. So one of them, by the name of Lawi, called out, "Don't kill him. If you really want to get rid of him, why kill him? Throw him in the well." Because they had several options. One was to basically just slaughter the kid. The other was to throw him in a remote location so he would starve to death. Because remember, they didn't want to leave any evidence on the scene. The crime scene was supposed to be left clean. So they wanted to somehow kill him without leaving anything to be discovered later by their father. So there was debate as to how they should kill him. Lawi said, "Don't kill our brother. Throw him inside a well. Because what's the worst that can happen? Either he dies in the well," the logic was that he proposed to his brothers, "or that a caravan might pass by and they'd pick him up and take him with them." Which is why they actually stayed back watching over him to see what was going to happen later. They stayed back so that the caravan, when it came, picked him up. The caravan people in the caravan might have thought that, well, this kid might be lost, so let's find his parents. That's why they stayed back. They approached the caravan and they told them that this is our slave, he ran away from us, and we're willing to sell him. So the caravan members would not suspect any foul play whatsoever. It was a very elaborate plan if you think about it. So eventually Lawi convinced the rest of the group not to kill Yusuf. A very noble act, indeed, because, the other option, the other alternative was for him to die. Now let's fast forward 40 years. What you find here is that Yusuf is now the king of Egypt. He owned not just the cattle and the wealth of the nation, he even owned his own subjects. He owned the citizens of Egypt. They sold themselves to the king in exchange for food rations, which of course he later gave back to them. He gave them back their entitlement to the government. He gave them the food. They sold themselves in exchange for the food, but then he released all of them as free human beings. But we're looking at the king of the kings, the one who owns not just the land and the crop and the food and the wealth, but owns the people as well. He's sitting on the back of his horse, along with many of his aides, assistants, ministers, generals, what have you. They were waiting outside the city for another caravan. The caravan consisted of Yusuf's father and his brothers. As the caravan approached from the distant horizon, Jibreel descended upon Yusuf. There's an urgent message of some sort. He said to Yusuf, "Why don't you alight from the back of your horse as a sign of respect for your father?" He said, "Well, I can see my father approaching, but he's too far. And besides, even if I alight from the back of my horse, if I get off, he's not going to see me." And there's a very delicate lesson in this. Because many times when we respect others, we only do so out of nothing but sheer, pure, and simple hypocrisy. And you find that in many societies. Where we respect him because he's looking at me. If he wasn't looking at me, I wouldn't give him any respect whatsoever. Yusuf said that I'm not getting off the back of my horse because my father can't see me. So getting off the back of my horse as a sign of respect really won't yield any results there. It's not going to make him feel any better. He's not going to be proud of his son because he got off the back of his horse even though he's the king. Jibreel commanded Yusuf to open his hands. He said to him, open your hands. He opened his hand. A light shot out of his palms towards the sky. Yusuf said, what was that? He said, that is the light of a prophetic lineage. You've lost the right to have your kids be sent as messengers and prophets of God. Why? Because you didn't pay your father enough respect. Even that much, that minute, infinitesimal amount of respect that would not have yielded into any result, into any more greater respect in his father's heart. You've lost the right to a prophetic lineage. So who gets the prophetic lineage? Your brother, Lawi. Why? He was one of the co-conspirators. I mean, Yusuf obviously didn't object to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I'm just thinking aloud here. Why Lawi? He was among my brothers. He was among that group which set out to kill me. Sure, he convinced them otherwise, but he was with them, right? He did a noble thing. And even that small gesture, which led the way for Yusuf to stay alive, which convinced the brothers to spare the life of Yusuf, that has to be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how delicate the justice of the Lord happens to be. Yusuf loses his prophetic lineage because of a simple, very small, seemingly insignificant act. And Lawi gets a prophetic lineage. Musa alayhi salam, one of the greatest prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was a descendant of Lawi, not Yusuf. Because he did something that was also small and insignificant, yet great in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, human beings are born with an innate kindness in them. I mean, all you have to do is look in the eyes of a newborn baby. What do you see? You see nothing but a sense of purity, a sense of sincerity, a sense of beauty overwhelms newborn children. Because they're born with that innate, that instinctual, that natural kindness built into them. Richard Dawkins, the infamous, I should say, British atheist, anti-religion, anti-God, anti-Islam, anti-Judaism, anti-Christianity, anti-everything. In his book, he says that if someone talks to you about a Christian child or a Muslim child, and I quote him verbatim, he says, kindly stop them and tell them that a child is too young to know his or her position on matters relating to religion. In other words, you can't have a Muslim child. All you have is a child. And then the child later grows to adopt a certain religious denomination or a religious philosophy and becomes either Muslim, Christian, Jewish, or atheist, or what have you. But I beg to differ. Every child is born with that universal moral standard that we call Islam. The moral standard that tells you what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong. I mean, a child might not know, might not adopt a position, a particular position on every little detail in the religion. But a child, even a child, has that innate kindness in him, which allows him to understand that to kill is bad, and to help someone who's about to die is good. I mean, these things are very clear even to small children. So you see that in every newborn child. The problem is that as we grow older, that innate kindness gets overshadowed. The more we're exposed to indecent scenes and immoral acts and the